Okay, welcome to another edition of Friday Afternoon Unboxing. This is supposed to be a phonograph that only took 9 days for the United States Postal Service to deliver. And that's one of my biggest complaints with the post office, the delivery time. You can ship something through FedEx or UPS ground and get it in 3 or 4 business days from one end of the country to the other. You know, the post office, you're going to pay more money, and it might take up to 2 weeks or longer to get your package. So let's open this up and see if it's in one piece or did it get destroyed. I noticed the words very fragile written on the box, which that means the post office probably drop kicked it and threw it off the truck a few times just to test it out. Okay, let's see what we have here. See if the packing job is up to par. More tape to cut. Well, I see. Ooh, they used foam packing peanuts. I'm impressed. And as you might expect, this is another old talking book machine, this one from about 1957. And the outside of the case looks to be unharmed. Let's open it up and see what the inside looks like. They actually put padding on the inside to protect the turntable. I'm impressed. And they even taped the tone arm down. Well, this seller gets a A+. And there's the label, Talking Book Reproducer. This is a Model D, 2-speed unit, 16 and 33 RPM. Although someone told me that these units actually used 4-speed motors with a stop pin to keep the user from advancing the speed lever past 33. And it's possible to remove the turntable platter, break off the stop pin, and have a 4-speed phonograph. And I think someone might have already done that with this model. So let's take it down to the shop and analyze it. Okay, let's run the smoke test. Amplifier on, motor on. Judging by the noises it's making, it's going to need some maintenance. I'm getting nothing out of the amplifier, so either the cartridge is dead or we have an amplifier issue. Okay, let's open this up and see what we've got. And here's the amp, which is basically the same amplifier that they used in the 1960s 3-speed version. Well, we do have a problem with the amplifier. It seems to be intermittent, but they were nice enough to give us a schematic diagram pasted to the inside bottom of the cabinet, as you can see there. Okay, I think our actual problem is an intermittent cartridge, which will have to be replaced anyway since the tips are gone. Okay, come on. See, I can touch the input, pass a signal, but can't always get a signal through the cartridge. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. Now this machine uses an Astatic 83-7D cartridge, which is a dual diamond tipped LP cartridge, and unlike the newer players that have a turnover bracket that can be flipped from one side to the other, this one does not. In order to use the second needle, you have to unplug the cartridge and physically turn it over and plug it back into the holder. Well, since I'm likely going to be using this thing as a conventional 4-speed phonograph, I'll most likely install a standard flip style holder where I can flip between LP and 78 stylus tips. Okay, here it is with another cartridge installed. We're playing, but the amplifier has a good bit of distortion, and this drive mechanism needs to be taken care of. And obviously someone has already broken the stop piece off to enable this drive mechanism to run at 45 and 78. Originally this 2-dot position was 16, the 3-dot position was 33, the single dot was neutral, and then from the factory there would have been a stop piece to keep the user from pushing the lever past the neutral position, but someone has already broken that piece off, so obviously we can play 45 and 78 records on this thing when the thing's actually working right. Here's the drive mechanism, just your conventional 4-speed idler drive mechanism. It needs to be taken apart, cleaned, re-lubricated and such, and then it'll be ready to go. There was an earlier model of this machine. In fact, there's one listed on another auction site right now that has a much lower serial number, and I believe it uses a turret drive system. And the reason I know that is because the turntable platter on the other machine is a lot thinner than this one, and it still has the old mouse fur covering on it, so I think it's an older type that, like I said, uses the turret drive system. And I'd like to have that machine, but at the $75 they want for it, and the cabinet looks worse than this one, I can't justify it. Especially when I only paid less than $5 for this one. But first, let's get the amplifier working to peak performance, and then we'll tackle the drive mechanism. I have the tone arm tied down to keep it from flopping around. Okay, the only 2 paper capacitors in the unit are these 2 yellow Astron 0.1 microfarad coupling caps. One couples the driver stage to the output stage, and the other one is in the preamp stage. So let's check the grid voltage on the output tube. It should be 0 or negative voltage. If it's anything positive, then that indicates this capacitor is leaky, and that could very well cause the distortion that we were having. Okay, checking the grid voltage on the audio output tube. We have about a half a volt, which probably means this capacitor is a little bit leaky. Now checking the cathode voltage on the audio output tube. The schematic calls for 23 volts. We have 13 volts. And our audio output tube plate voltage is supposed to be 265, but we're reading 253, which that's not a big enough difference to really get my attention. So right now let's address the low voltage on the cathode and the possible leaky coupling capacitor here. And the cathode resistor is supposed to be 240. We're reading 270 ohms, which is teetering on the point of being out of tolerance, but it's not bad enough that I'm going to concern myself with it right now. Okay, this Astron cap is a little leaky, but it's not as bad as what some capacitors that I've tested were. In fact, it's only leaking badly at like 400 volts applied across it. And yeah, you know your workbench is too messy whenever you have the test equipment balanced in your lap, laying on its back in order to test things. Okay, I've replaced the 2 coupling capacitors. Let's check the voltage on the output tube grid now. Before we were reading about a half a volt, I think. Now we're reading about 0.057, so that's pretty good. Before we were reading like 0.45 or something like that, so that's better. Now let's see what our cathode voltage is. Cathode voltage is still low, so let's look into that. Well, you know what? I made a mistake. This schematic is so blurry that I thought it said 23 volts on the cathode. It actually does say 13, so that appears to be just fine. And it's starting to look like this amplifier is fixed. Okay, that sounds a little better. Got ample volume, although I am picking up a little bit of distortion still. Okay, back on the talking book record player, and I know we're sort of bouncing around on this. I now have the drive mechanism torn apart, and all the pieces here in the little tray here. First order of business is to clean the motor bearings. Now, ideally, it would be best to soak these in something like a lacquer thinner to break down all the old oil and clean the bearings out good, but since I don't have any lacquer thinner at the moment, I'm just going to use a combination of rubbing alcohol and contact cleaner to get them as clean as we can. And we'll re-lubricate with this zoom spout here. This is a good quality non-detergent lightweight oil. Okay, we now have the drive mechanism all cleaned up, lubricated, and ready to go back into the record player. I also replaced these 3 rubber motor mounting grommets that were severely rotten. Might have to replace this idler wheel because it's a little glazed up and slick, but those can be rebuilt. And in addition to the zoom spout oil, I also use a product called white lithium grease, otherwise known as Lubriplate. And there's a product called Phono Lube that we can also use for this purpose. Each product will work as good as the other, in my opinion. We technicians, we mainly use the expensive stuff. We don't use cheap stuff. We use expensive stuff to get the job done right. Okay, now let's put this phono motor back in the record player and see what happens. Okay, we now have the motor cleaned, lubricated, all put back together. In addition to this zoom spout oil, we also use a product called white lithium grease, otherwise known as Lubriplate. And there's also a product called Phono Lube that works equally well. Here's an example of white lithium grease. Now we'll put the platter back on and give it a test run. I think we may have to replace this idler wheel because it's kind of bumpy and glazed and slick, and it's probably just worn out and needs to be rebuilt. Okay, here we are back together, and that idler wheel does have a little bump to it.
His toast is black, but she is shown the pretty. Her skirt is short, but Lord, her legs are sturdy.
Okay, here we are on 33 RPM.
When you hear me, tell me you will stay. Make me smile.
Switch and volume control, and the other is the motor switch and tone control. Use the round knob to start.
Here we are with a 16 RPM record.
The tone arm of the talking book machine is equipped with a pickup cartridge that has a sapphire or a diamond needle.
And here we are with a 78 RPM record. Now I have not installed the 33 and 78 RPM flip style cartridge yet. Okay, we're about out of time for this video, but I'll make a part 2 for this a little bit later. We'll tie up some loose ends and that'll take care of it. Okay, thanks for watching, and more to come later.